have, since 2024, further strengthened our alignment with EU priorities and policies, European values, and this is why we have also defined 8 strategic priorities. The first one of which, so our top priorities, you can see here on this slide, is climate action and environmental sustainability. What does that mean? Actually financing energy networks, energy efficiency, grids, storage, renewables, and climate resilience. This is our absolute top priority, and in the next period we will continue consolidating our profile as the Europe's climate bank. What does that mean? It means that we at the bank basically believe that reinforcing Europe's competitiveness and security will only be possible through affordable green transition. In terms of the other priorities, you see them on the slide, but I will not get into them today since today we're really focusing on the green transition. So I wanted to give you a bit of the overview of the numbers, as I said, because I think they say a powerful story about where we are today in Europe in terms of the investment needs and the work done on the green transition. In terms of the results, 2025 was an absolutely historic year for the EIB, where it provided record 100 billion euros of total financing, which included 76.9 billion of financing inside the EU and 9 billion outside of the EU or outside of the EIB. An additional 15.7 billion euros were provided by the European Investment Fund, which is primarily focusing on supporting SMEs across Europe. In terms of the green transition, as you can see, we had basically dedicated nearly 60% of our portfolio, so 57 billion euros, went for green projects at the EIB in the last year. And however, our impact didn't stop there. These 57 billion of green projects actually translate into 190 billion of total amount of the investments, because as some of you are probably aware, EIB typically doesn't finance 100% of project costs. We can go up to 50%, and therefore our financing usually mobilizes much larger amounts of investments. And for the green project, this was 190 billion in the last year. In terms of energy, which of course is at the heart of the green transition and our top priority sector, we have invested a record 33 billion euros, out of which 11.6 billion last year went for grids and storage, 7.9 billion for energy efficiency, and 9.8 billion renewables. So these are really our priorities. Needless to reiterate, but maybe some of you are not aware, we have stopped financing fossil fuels or any of the associated infrastructure since 2020, and therefore we're really focusing on renewables, low carbon technologies, in strengthening the grid capacities, electricity networks, and so on. So how did we actually, where does this strong commitment to green transition come from? I wanted to take a step back and remind you of a strategic document that the EIB adopted in 2020, where basically 27 shareholders of the EIB, 27 member states of the European Union, unanimously adopted and decided that the EIB would transform itself into the climate bank, meaning we will stop financing fossil fuels and introduce very ambitious climate targets. This was a very strong signal that Europe is extremely serious about tackling climate change, and that we are also serious in terms of phasing out from fossil fuels and reducing our dependency on them. In that time, we had 4, let's say, key pillars. First one was accelerating the green transition by mobilizing private sector investment, which of course is absolutely critical for the investments of green projects, because the public sector support is simply not sufficient to meet our climate objectives. Supporting just transition, basically by channeling financing also into the cities, are most vulnerable to the transition to the low carbon economy, but also most vulnerable to the adverse impacts of the climate change. Then we also aligned all our new operations with the objectives of the Paris Agreement already in 2020, and we were the first multilateral development bank to do so. And then finally, we have committed to building strategic coherence and accountability. As a pioneer of green bonds, we are aware that the transparency and accountability are actually key to mobilizing sustainable finance at scale. And this is why we have worked very closely with the Commission on development of the taxonomy and a number of other sustainability standards to actually introduce standard way of measuring what green projects actually are and prevent and reduce greenwashing. So 5 years later, this was the roadmap that we had adopted that I just presented. This was from 2020, so covering the period from 21 to 25. Given that this period is behind us, I wanted to show you what did we deliver on this, and what have been our achievements. As you can see, since 2019, the investments in the climate action and environmental sustainability drastically took off. And since then, we have had a continuous and progressive growth in the investments for green projects. You will see that the dark blue part actually presents the climate action in terms of mitigation of climate change, whereas the dark gray is the adaptation and the light gray is environmental sustainability. So you will see that most of our climate action investments actually focus on the mitigation. And as I already presented, actually in the last year, nearly 60% of our portfolio went for green projects. So if they say that there is no real demand in the market, and companies are not looking for new technologies, companies are not looking to green their portfolios, this is the proof is in the pudding, as they say. So you can see that the numbers usually don't lie. In terms of the green finance investments that we supported since 21 to 25, so during the period of the previous climate bank roadmap, you will see that we have progressively and every year consistently actually outperformed our targets. So the gray column is actually assumed target trend, so the targets that we have set, and the dark blue one is what has actually been achieved. So you will see that in terms of the cumulative volume of green finance investments supported by the EIB Group in the period 21 to 25, we have financed 740 billion euros as opposed to the 500 billion euros target that we have set out for ourselves. In terms of the adaptation, this is really admittedly the most challenging part, because as you could see, most of our green financing actually goes for the mitigation, and we're continuously always looking for good adaptation projects. You will see that we have also on that, in that respect, actually increased progressively our portfolio, which is now almost 4 times bigger since the rollout of the adaptation plan in 2021, which was also part of the strategic directions from the climate bank roadmap baseline. So as you will see in the future, so in the CBR1, we have had 15% of climate action financing as the only target, and we can now actually put a number on it. And in the next phase, we're aiming for 30 billion euros for the period until 2030 to invest in adaptation. Energy, as I mentioned earlier, is actually at the heart of the green transition and is our absolute priority. As the geopolitical situation today clearly shows, any energy dependence on external actors actually reduces our ability and strategic autonomy. This is why we see it not only as part of the right thing to do, as I mentioned before, in terms of the environmental aspect, but also in terms of the political reality that we are today facing. And this is where this graph shows how the investment needs between the grids and storage efficiency and renewables shift over years. And as I mentioned before, with the numbers, the biggest investments, the biggest chunk of our portfolio in the energy last year went for grids and storage. That has been recognized as actually the bottleneck for further energy transition, because of course the grid capacity is actually the absolute enabler. No matter what energy sources, whether it's renewables or some other sources, we need strong grids. And the needs are huge across the member states, and the EIB has been doing a lot at adjusting our financing products, our advisory support to help member states in preparing these very significant capital projects.